Good morning, everyone. This is Mike.
And this is Pauline.
And we start off with the Society news for Friday, the 24th of August, 2018. On Tuesday, the Ride Swimming Group will be swimming this coming Tuesday on the 28th of August at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the sessions, and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining the group, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the Waterside Pool.
Also on Tuesday, there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday the 28th of August. The first in West Wight at the end of the Line Cafe, Yarmouth, from 10:30 to 12, and the second in Bembridge at the Cloisters from 10:15 to 12. Please go along and support these if you're able.
On Friday, the Striders group will be meeting on the Friday the 31st of August for a walk of just over 5 miles in Wroxall. As there is an initial steep climb, the walk will take at least 2.5 hours. If you wish to attend, please be at the Star in Wroxall for a 10:40 p.m. start. I'm sorry, that should be 10:40 a.m. start. This is also the lunch venue, which should be at approximately 1:15 p.m.
And in other news, please note there will be no activities taking place at Millbrook House throughout August. All groups will restart in September. The Freshwater Book Group will be meeting in the library at 11 o'clock until noon on Tuesday the 28th, this Tuesday coming. They're a very friendly group and we read some interesting and varied books, either on memory stick or disc. We also have a hot drink.
In the near future, Sight for Wight will be offering a yoga taster session. If you think you would like to try this, one of the members, Danielle Burgess, has told us about her yoga experience and says, "I have recently taken up yoga and I am wondering why on earth I have never taken it up before now. I have attended about 5 of Sue's classes and I am already noticing the benefits from them. A better night's sleep, an even more sense of calm and less anxiety, a loosening up of my joints, and that's just for starters. The classes have been relaxing and tranquil. Sue gently talks you through all of the different positions and movements, encouraging you to slow down and to make time for yourself. The technique of the deep breathing does take a little time to master, but once learnt, one can put it into practice at times of stress and anxiety. The gentle stretches are done slowly, and you only need to go as far as you feel comfortable with. So do come along and give it a try. You have nothing to lose, just all your worries and cares for an hour or so. Details of the date and time for the taster sessions will be available soon."
Sight for Wight, Isle of Wight Society for the Blind, has entered into partnership with Guide Dogs to promote participation in the Guide Dogs My Guide programme. You are invited to the following My Guide training session. This is a Level 1 My Guide training session, Community Sighted Guide. The date of it is Wednesday the 5th of September 2018 and the time is 9:30 until 12:30. The venue is Sight for Wight, Isle of Wight Society for the Blind, Millbrook House, 137 Carrisbrook Road, Newport. The course aims to give you an understanding of the emotional and practical consequences of being blind or partially sighted, and the role of sighted guiding in increasing independence. You will be taught the skills to sighted guide and will practice with other volunteers. At the end of the course, you will receive a Community Sighted Guide certificate. If you're interested in taking part, please contact Laura Jasper or Michelle Taylor on 522205. Sorry, that's 522205, or inquiries at iwsb.org.uk, and please contact us by Monday the 3rd of September to arrange your place.
To support our recruitment drive for volunteers, we will be advertising our vacancies on a regular basis in the hope that you may have a friend, relative, neighbour or contact who would be interested in volunteering with the Society. We have approximately 85 active volunteers who support the Society in many ways to provide the services we offer to our members. Our volunteer team are committed to their volunteer roles and have fun and social interaction along the way, which is of mutual benefit to everyone involved. Current vacancies are minibus drivers, dress for less retail support, escorts on our minibus, events ambassadors to support at island-wide events, fundraising by way of bucket collections and island supermarkets, sighted guides for our monthly and varied island walks, My Guide sighted guide escorts. Please contact Michelle Taylor, Volunteer Manager, on telephone number 5522205 or email volunteers@iwsb.org.uk for further details.
And now the scaffolding news. Here is a list of known footway obstructions for works, including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates, as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. The first area is the Bay and Ventnor area. There is currently scaffolding at the Premier Inn, 1 to 9 Esplanade, Sandown, 11A and 11B, St John's Road, Sandown, the Toymaster, 103 High Street, Sandown. The scaffold is up in Albion Road, 1 Station Avenue, Sandown, the Castle Pub, 12 to 14 Fitzroy Street, Sandown, 36 Melville Street, Sandown, the Ocean Hotel, High Street, Sandown, and 5 Station Road, Sandown. Also, Sandown Library, 119 High Street, Sandown, 16 Regent Street, Shanklin, the corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road, Ventnor, Boniface Road and into Trinity Road, Ventnor, 3 Eleanor House, Grove Road, Ventnor, 3 East Street, Ventnor, and Clive Barber's Jewellers, High Street, Ventnor. I'm sorry, going back to Eleanor House, it's number 2 Eleanor House, Grove Road, Ventnor. New scaffolding is due up at Railway Bridge Avenue Road, Sandown from the 10th of September. There is a current cherry picker at Skew Bridge, Sandown Road Lake from the 3rd of September. There are current hoardings at Premier Inn, 1 to 9 Esplanade, Sandown. There are currently skips at 3 Clarence Road, Shanklin.
In the Cowes area, there is currently scaffolding at 91 High Street, Cowes, 93 High Street, Cowes, which is behind the hoarding, Sainsbury's 129 to 130 High Street, Cowes, 78 Park Road, Cowes, 14 Market Hill, Cowes, 12 Union Road, Cowes, Cowes Library, Beckford Road, Cowes, also up in West Hill Road, Geraldine's at 3 York Avenue, East Cowes.
And in the Newport area, there is currently scaffolding at 18 Lugley Street, Newport, Domino's, St James's Street, Newport, Hurst and Son, Lugley Street, Newport. The scaffolding is up in Lugley Street and Holyrood Street, 36 Orchard Street, Newport, 16 Drill Hall Road, Newport, Santander 26 St James's Street, Newport. The scaffold is also up around the corner in Pyle Street. There is a cherry picker at 79 to 81 Pyle Street, Newport.
In the Ryde area, there is currently scaffolding at Boots 170 High Street, Ryde, Hills Court, High Street and Newport Street, Ryde, West End, 34 John Street, Ryde, with scaffold oversailing into Newport Street, 12 George Street, Ryde, 18 George Street, Ryde, 73 George Street, Ryde, 23 St John's Road, Ryde, 62 High Street, Ryde, 91 High Street, Ryde, 137A High Street, Ryde, 58 The Strand, Ryde, Watson, Bull and Porter, 9 High Street, Ryde. A new scaffolding is due up at 12A High Street, Ryde from the 3rd of September. There is currently skips at 33 High Street, Bembridge, 32 Foreland Road, Bembridge, 37 Longmead Road, Ryde, 9 Yalfs Road, Ryde, Walden, Nettleston Hill, Seaview. And there is a new crane at 19 Albert Street, Ryde from the 2nd of September.
In the West Wight area, there is currently scaffolding at Jojo's, School Green Road, Freshwater, Broadway Garage, the Broadway, Totland. There are currently skips at Christmas Cottage, Gyers Road, Freshwater, and 10 Heathfield Close, Freshwater.
This week's In Touch. In Touch in this week's episode, Brewdog and Deep Mind. The firm Brewdog is at the forefront of the resurgence in trendy craft beer in the UK, but as Tom Walker reports, a tribunal panel has found their lack of knowledge in relation to an employee facing sight loss astonishing. Ian Brown from RNIB Scotland tells us more about what workers in similar positions can expect from their bosses, and our columnist Mike Lambert marks the end of the hot and sultry weather of summer with a reflection on a moment in time enjoyed in his garden. We also hear about a new development in artificial intelligence, which has been described by Moorfields ophthalmic consultant Dr. Pierce Keane as jaw-dropping. It's a breakthrough with repercussions for patients worried about their sight and for waiting lists.
And now for articles from the county press. The headline is Fairer Ferries Call. The article is by Emily Pearce and the subheading is MP Writes to Government over Wight Link Sale. Cheaper fares, better late night sailings and even a public buyout of Wight Link or Red Funnel could be on the cards if the island's MP can convince the government to challenge the ferry firms. Bob Seeley, the island's MP, has written to the Department for Transport regarding the potential sale of Wight Link for an estimated £300 million, as reported by the county press earlier this month. In his letter, he asks the government to consider imposing a public service obligation on its new owner, ensuring island residents and not shareholders benefit from any sale. A public service obligation could include, for example, cheaper fares for island residents and those in receipt of benefits, and guaranteed late-night sailings linking up with trains arriving at Portsmouth and Southampton. Bob Seeley also talks of a stipulation preventing owner corporations from parking debts accrued by their other companies with the Isle of Wight ferry firms. In the letter, copied to Transport Secretary Chris Grayling on Tuesday, Mr Seeley said the island was treated unfairly compared with other UK islands. He said, "Of particular concern to islanders is the fact the firm was denationalised in the 1980s with no public service obligation, in stark contrast to the regulated franchised arrangements in place for the railways. The island has suffered since by having some of the most expensive ferries per mile in the world. I am frustrated to see other islands benefiting from subsidised travel or a fixed link when the Isle of Wight has neither. Do you accept the two main ferry firms run an effective duopoly? Do you believe it is acceptable for a lifeline service to be structured in a purely commercial manner, with obligations to shareholders taking priority over those to users? Wight Link Chief Executive Keith Greenfield declined to comment on the potential sale and told the county press he met regularly with Mr Seeley to discuss ferry issues. Emphasising the firm's contribution to island life, he said, "Wight Link has just invested £45 million in our Portsmouth to Fishbourne service, including a purpose-built environmentally friendly car ferry, Victoria of Wight, and improvements to port facilities to reduce delays. We actively promote island businesses through our Wight Taste outlets, support more than 100 charities, sports clubs and talented athletes, and offer numerous discounted fares to groups, including 50% off for NHS patients attending mainland appointments. Wight Link continues to work closely with the island community to further improve services for residents and visitors alike." Speaking to the county press, Mr Seeley stopped short of calling for nationalisation and said there was little appetite at Westminster for such a move. In the long term, however, he supported the Isle of Wight Council borrowing money to buy at least one of the ferry firms, although with a management team rather than council officers running services. Mr Seeley said, "A non-profit arrangement could be a way forward. The council would have more social responsibility than a corporate vehicle. The problem is the ferry companies are beholden to shareholders, not island residents. I want to shift that focus. I think they should have a greater sense of social responsibility towards the island. I'm trying to start a conversation and engage with government rather than wave placards and make demands. I have a good relationships with the ferry companies. They know I don't like their profit margins, which are too high, and that I'm concerned about the level of debt which we pay for." Red Funnel declined to comment. And in an aside, the county press says more than 5,000 people have signed a petition calling on the government to regulate ferry fares. The petition was created by Sarah Johnston. At 10,000 signatures, the government has to respond to the petition, and it can be signed online.
Anger over plan for 60 homes at Northwood. Arguably the most contentious issue to hit Northwood in the last decade, plans for 66 houses drew more than 150 objectors to a meeting this week. The monthly meeting of the Northwood Parish Council was packed with concerned locals. Parish Clerk Barbara Herbert said in the 10 years since the council was established, she had never seen such a response from the public. "We have more than 150 people all objecting. The community is all against it," she said. "In my 10 years as clerk, I have never seen anything remotely like what happened last night. Usually, if we get 6 people come along, we think it's a lot. It was good to see that so many people care about Northwood. The parish council recommended the plans were refused." Kevin Richardson, who lives on Newport Road next to the proposed development, told the county press people were concerned about drainage and site access. The drainage is not suitable already, so adding another 66 houses will be a disaster, and people are concerned about access. It will be an accident waiting to happen. I know the parish council has recommended refusal, but I don't know how successful it's going to be. It feels very much as though residents are fighting a losing battle and we won't win the war. The application has been submitted to the Isle of Wight Council by Peter Harding. People can comment on plans until today, Friday.
The heading is Curry House fined £35,000, the article by Emily Pearce. The company running an Indian restaurant and takeaway in Lake, which repeatedly failed to meet hygiene standards, has been fined more than £35,000. Shahnaaz Isle of Wight Limited, which runs Shahnaaz Indian Cuisine in Sandown Road, was fined £35,000 following a hearing at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court this week. Abdul Hamid, who runs the company, admitted 4 offences, including failing to ensure food was protected against contamination and a lack of staff supervision and training. He was individually fined £1,295. The company also failed to comply with an improvement notice issued by the Isle of Wight Council following consistently low food hygiene ratings over a 2-year period. The council, which brought the prosecution, warned food establishments face serious consequences for failing to meet hygiene standards. It urged all Isle of Wight businesses to ensure they complied with the rules. The council's strategic manager for regulatory and community safety services, Amanda Gregory, said, "We have a high number of food establishments on the island, and the majority operate to a very good standard. For those which do not meet the requirements, officers provide advice and information to assist them in complying. However, this is the 3rd prosecution of a food business this year, which should act as a clear message that we will not hesitate to take enforcement action." The council won £3,514 costs.
There's growing concern over bike thefts. The Isle of Wight's reputation as a bicycle island is at risk after a spate of high-value bicycle thefts. Reports of bicycle thefts are being posted on the Isle of Wight cycling group pages frequently on social media, and a trend is emerging of high-value cycles being selected and cheaper bikes being ignored. With the week-long Isle of Wight Cycle Fest starting tomorrow, Saturday, concerns have been raised for both Isle of Wight cyclists and the many visitors coming to the island. John Aldridge, cyclist and retired police officer, told the county press, "As members of several cycling groups on the island and from monitoring the island cycling community on social media, I see reports of thefts every day. The bicycle island is fast getting a reputation as a no-go area for cyclists. Campsites seem to be targeted and the thieves are selecting high-value cycles. One family lost 4 bikes. As a recently retired police officer, I appreciate the limited resources, but this is clearly an emerging issue impacting on families and the reputation of the island. There is a growing sense of frustration on the groups with the apparent lack of response. Hampshire Constabulary said these thefts were being investigated. Acting Inspector Jed Armitage said, "We have been collating recent reports of the theft of high-value bicycles at campsites on the Isle of Wight to establish potential links between these reports. We have issued proactive messages with our crime prevention advice to keep residents and holidaymakers informed, but have also been carrying out other activities in relation to these thefts." Isle of Wight cyclist advocacy group Cycle Wight said, "We as a group are very concerned over this. The figure for all the bikes is many thousands of pounds. The island promotes itself as Bicycle Island, and anything detrimental to that is harmful. We will be distributing forms issued by the police over the weekend at the Cycle Festival, which allow people to register their bikes."
International victory for Island Distilleries Gin. The team at the Isle of Wight Distillery are celebrating a double victory at the International Wines and Spirits Competition Awards, IWSC. The distillery picked up silver awards for the original Mermaid Gin and the HMS Victory Navy Strength Gin. Co-founder Xavier Baker said, "We are thrilled to win this award for not one but two of our products. The IWSC is a big deal in the spirits world, and to have achieved a silver award in our first 3 years and be internationally recognised is an achievement the whole team can be proud of." As well as gin, Isle of Wight Distillery produces an oak-aged gin, Rock Sea vodka, Isle of Wight whisky, and the latest edition, HMS Victory Navy Strength Rum, released in July.
Uni places secured. This is Cowes Enterprise College. More students from Cowes Enterprise College are heading to some of the top universities after the number of students gaining high grades increased this year. Etienne Tracy, who achieved 2 A-star grades, 1A and 1B grade, will study human, social and political sciences at Peterhouse, Cambridge. Another top achiever was Daisy Cody, who will study medicine at Southampton University after gaining the final A grade needed to start her degree. Daisy, who worked in a retirement home while studying for her 4th A-level, gained 3 A grades last year, but needed a further A in chemistry to secure her place. She said, "I'm really looking forward to finally getting stuck into medicine." Also studying medicine is Loena Wight, who secured a place at Peninsula Medical School at the University of Plymouth with her A-levels in biology, chemistry and maths. Meanwhile, head boy Charles Roberts proved it as easy as ABC with his results in English, sociology and history. He is heading to Bristol University.
The Dance Party That Just Keeps On Giving by Imogen 2. As a decade of decade dance is celebrated, the charity Dance Party has presented another donation to the island's hospice. Launched by Tony Martin as a one-off event to celebrate his 30 years in the business, Decade Dance now holds annual events celebrating a mix of nostalgic music. A total of £56,000 has been raised in support of Mountbatten since Decade Dance began, and Tony presented a cheque for £12,300 that was raised through last year's party. This November, the 10th Decade Dance event will again raise money for Mountbatten, which had cared for Tony's mother, Eileen. Tony said, "When I put on that first party to commemorate my 30 years as a DJ, I could never have imagined just how successful and popular it would become. Once it did take off, my challenge was to make it more decadent every year. Some people have come along every year, but without everyone's support, not just the paying guests, but also the many companies who provide substantial discount on services, it wouldn't have been possible to raise the huge amounts we have for Mountbatten." Nigel Hartley, Mountbatten's chief executive, said, "Tony's continuing support for Mountbatten is absolutely incredible, and we are so very grateful to him for his enthusiasm and commitment in raising such a huge amount over the past 10 years. This funding will have helped to ensure as many islanders and their families as possible receive the very best care and support when facing death, dying and bereavement. I send my hearty congratulations to Tony for reaching this milestone and thank him for everything he's done." Tickets for Decade Dance, which is held on Saturday, November the 24th at Cowes Yacht Haven, are available from Cowes Yacht Haven, Master of Disguise Newport, the Bagel Wrap Ride and the Party Shop Shanklin, or have a look online.
Skate park condemned before it even opens. Sandown's new junior skate park is being torn down by the town council before it has even opened. The decision to remove it came after a damning report judged it to be of high risk to users. The problem have been criticised by local skateboarders. In a post on their Facebook page, the White Trash Skate Shop, based in Ryde, said, "Brilliant. We offered help and advice on this project, but Sandown Town Council did not take us up on it. This is the result. Maybe next time they will actually ask people who use the park what is needed. Very frustrating. In the report by Andy Figgins, Inspections Limited, the inspector found a litany of problems, including a quarter pipe which had a safety rail said to be too low, raising fears a rider could sail right over it and hit the fence behind. Other problems identified include the ramp on the structure had a weld in it, making it brittle and at risk of splitting on impact. The ramp flexed and moved, was on uneven ground and had an excessive gaps under it. A driveway with steps was sited on uneven ground, and the side of the ramp had a gap, allowing items to be inserted. Sandown councillor Debbie Andre said, "I'm sure the efforts of the Sandown Community Partnership to provide a junior skate park were well-intentioned, but it's clear that they do not possess the requisite skills to handle projects of this type. The project will now be considered by Sandown Town Council, but questions need to be asked of the partnership, whose membership includes several Sandown Town councillors." Sandown Mayor Councillor Jack Mereweather, Partnership Secretary until this week when she resigned over the issue, said the junior skate park had been paid for using funds raised by the partnership. She said, "We are really upset. There is nothing we want more than to see that open. At the end of the day, it is the safety of the children that is important." In a statement, the Town Council said it regretted the park in Sandham Gardens was unable to be used and would be removed due to manufacturing issues. It added, "The Town Council and Sandown Community Partnership share the disappointment with our younger residents who were looking forward to this new facility. The installation of a junior skate park will be included in a review of our facilities at Sandham Gardens, which will be undertaken in the autumn."
And the heading is School Friends Reunited, and it's written by David Newball. More than 200 former pupils of Fairway Secondary Modern School in Sandown swapped stories of what they were doing now and remembered their school days at a reunion. The 206 former pupils attended the school between 1953, when it opened, and 1970, when it became a comprehensive school, after it merged with neighbouring Sandown Grammar School during the national school reorganisation. Among the former pupils who made the trip were 4 who came all the way from Australia. Other former pupils made the trip from the mainland to attend the reunion held at Hurricanes Rugby Club Clubhouse. An exhibition of old school photographs was on display, and former geography and PE teacher Bob Welsh, now 90 and thought to be the last surviving member of teaching staff, also attended. Mr. Welsh, who lives in Shanklin, was brought to the event by his son. The reunion was the brainchild of former pupil Dennis Rumbold, aged 66. Dennis, who became a draftsman and worked for Plessy after passing his O-levels, said he had run into pupils who he knew, including classmates who had been in the same form as him all the way through his time at the school between 1963 and 68. Dennis has also formed a Facebook site, which both pupils and their children and grandchildren contribute to help people keep in touch. Dennis said, "It was great to see people you had not seen for so many years." Dennis was also presented with £325 worth of vouchers following a collection at the event. The next reunion will take place in 5 years' time.
Restaurant couple have recipe for wedded bliss. He's the owner of one of the best-known businesses in Cowes. Rod Ainge's breakfasts at his cafe Egon's of Cowes are legendary, with both visiting yachtsmen and women satiating many a starving sailor and also providing impromptu hangover cures for locals and visitors alike. Now, Rod, 73, and his wife Jenny, 71, of the Green cows, have reached a milestone celebration 50 years of wedded bliss together. The couple met when they were both living in Leicestershire, where Rod worked as a mechanic and Jenny as a hairdresser. Jenny lived in a village called Keam, and Rod lived in an even smaller village nearby called Scraptoft. Jenny was a farmer's daughter, and Rod got to know her as her father's tractors needed repairing. They married when Rod was 23 and Jenny was 21 in Keam Parish Church, but decided to drastically re-evaluate their lives in their late 20s when they were told they could not have children. Rod said, "We took a bit of paper each and wrote down how we would wish to spend our time, and one thing we both wrote down was to be near the sea. I already had friends on the island because I used to work in the summer as a kitchen porter at Sandown." The couple moved to the island in 1974, and Rod got himself a job at a garage while Jenny worked at a beauty shop in Ryde. However, when Rod's older brother Barry, now deceased, came out of the army and could not decide what to do with himself, Rod, Jenny, Barry and his wife decided to open a restaurant in Sandown called the Salad Bowl. Rod said, "We had never done anything like it before. Fate had more surprises for Mr. and Mrs. Ainge." Rod said, after 18 years of marriage, Jenny came home 32 years ago and said she was expecting a baby, their daughter Samantha. Rod and Jenny decided to leave the restaurant and run a guest house in Station Avenue at Sandown, before eventually taking on Egon's. Tragedy very nearly struck when Jenny suffered a massive heart attack. As luck would have it, one of Rod's customers turned out to be a heart surgeon, and 9 years later Jenny is still very much on the scene. She looks after their twin granddaughters, while Rod still works 7 days a week at Egon's. Rod said, "It doesn't matter what we do, we just enjoy one another's company."
Island Holiday Fun for Boys from Calais Jungle by Laurie Little. After escaping their home country of Eritrea, being imprisoned, then spending a year in the infamous Calais jungle camp, two boys have just enjoyed an idyllic holiday on the Isle of Wight. Robel, 16, and Yeman, 17, have been placed into foster care in Northumberland and were invited to the island for a week by film director Sue Clayton of St Helens, who met them when they featured in her film Calais Children, A Case to Answer. Sue said it was a joy to see them so well and looking so different to when they had been starving, anxious and in all sorts of danger in the jungle. They've now settled in school and are doing really well. They've never had a holiday, and I'm so grateful for Tactile Adventures for generously offering them some taster sessions in kayaking and Sedgway, and offering them bikes so they could cycle round the area. It was lovely to see them just be normal young kids and be less stressed and worried about their future. The boys left Eritrea when they were 12 years old. The country is controlled by a military dictator, and teenage boys are recruited into the army for often lifelong conscription. Worse, as Christians, Yeman and Robel would have been put in the front line, where they would almost certainly have been killed while still very young. Both were sent away by their concerned families. They'd attended the same school but didn't know each other well. They spent 2 years struggling through beatings and imprisonment in Sudan and Libya, and then faced the dangerous journey crossing the Mediterranean to get to a safe place. In Calais, where they lived for another year, they faced traffickers, police violence and tear gassing. All Robel wanted was to join his aunt in Sheffield, which he had a legal right to do, but who was going to look after his rights? There was no one there to help him. Yeman had no family in England, but with his father and brother dead, and having learned English, his mind was set on England as a safe haven, where he'd grow up safely. Both boys want to return to Eritrea when they are older, to work as doctors, and hope their country will soon be safe for them to do that.
Drowning boys pulled from the sea by a hero. A Good Samaritan saved 2 boys from drowning at Ventnor. Ahmed Cohen, known as Cohen, and his fiancée, Emma Bayliss, were playing on the beach with their own son, Leo, 3, on Sunday evening, when Emma spotted the boys struggling in the water. She said, "They ran in and started diving into the waves, but the current was so strong. After 5 minutes they were going under. The younger one was panicking and pulling the older one down. I ran to the edge of the water and called to them. They couldn't get out and were screaming for help." Cohen, aged 31, who works at the Co-op garage in Sandown, ran into the sea, while Emma, aged 23, who works at the Island Day Nursery, Sandown, called 999. He managed to swim back to the beach with the 2 boys, cousins aged 13 and 11, clinging to him. When the Ventnor Coast Guard rescue team arrived, they told Cohen and Emma of Lake Green Road another 3 minutes in the water and the younger boy would have drowned. Emma said, "He had swallowed so much water. He was choking. I thought at one point, I can't let my son see this child drown." One of the paramedics said another 2 minutes and the headline would have been "Children washed up on Ventnor Beach." People need to know how dangerous it can be. The couple and Coast Guards kept the boys warm until an ambulance arrived to take them to St Mary's Hospital. They were sent home to Bonchurch. The older boy's family lives there, and his cousin was visiting in the early hours of the morning. The older boy's mum, who asked not to be named, said, "They were very shaken up. They were at risk of secondary drowning after swallowing lots of water. Both insisted they never wanted to go in the sea again, but we took them crabbing the next day so they could be near the water and see everyone was fine and safe. They even had a paddle. Cohen risked his life for our children, and we will be forever grateful."
St Helens proposal. St Helens Parish Council has arranged an extraordinary meeting to discuss plans for almost 60 homes on a former campsite. Members and residents will be able to debate the proposals for Guildford Park from 8 p.m. on Wednesday in the Sports Pavilion, St Helens. The application is for 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses as well as apartments for affordable housing and 118 car parking spaces. Parish Chairman Joe Robertson said, "We are very mindful of the community's interest in the development and wish to ensure there is an opportunity for local consideration and comment before the closing date of September the 7th, which falls before our next regular meeting." Vice Chairman John Coleman added, "We have arranged this meeting at short notice to ensure residents can contribute to the discussion and enable councillors to hear the views of local people, as well as enable them to comment directly if they so wish. The Parish Council is also organising a public presentation by Island Roads from 7 p.m. in the Pavilion on August the 29th to discuss planned work on the bridges along the causeway."
And on that note, we say goodbye to you. So,
Goodbye.
goodbye from Mike.
And from Pauline.
Right, good morning everyone. This is the County Press for August the 24th, and we begin with a letter from David Deacon of Totland Bay. "Something must be done to stop the steady erosion of facilities available to residents and visitors on this island. A general air of impoverishment and neglect pervades the scene. The Isle of Wight Council is strapped for cash, even to the extent of being unable to afford the maintenance of public toilets. This is in what purports to be a holiday island. We have recently lost a pair of valuable stores in Newport, Maplins and Staples, due to the lack of custom. Many smaller businesses are being forced down the same path. The island's hospital trust can no longer sustain the skills required for our ageing population. Doctors and teachers have no desire to move with their families to what is essentially a third-rate environment. Regional branches have contracted into sole Newport-based operations, and so it goes on. Against this backdrop, there is one stark exception: our vital link to the mainland, the island ferries. As reported in the county press, both monopolistic operators have been making absolutely extraordinary and growing profits in recent years. This is not through efficiency, but merely by the gross overcharging of fares. It is totally unacceptable that while our Isle of Wight Council remains strapped for cash, the ferry companies continue to feed from the unfettered island transport resource on which we all depend. If our island MP, Captain Bob, had an ounce of initiative, he would launch an immediate drive through the Minister of Transport for a substantial percentage levy to be placed on the ferry companies. I note that Wight Link is about to be sold. What better opportunity to capitalise on our island resource?
Not just cricket, from Roy Cooper, Shanklin. With reference to the County Press article last week stating the future of island cricket is looking assured after some great performances in national competitions. While it's good to see the progress of Ben Attrell and Zeph Wells, both young cricketers of impressive talent, dig a little deeper, however, and there's a rather darker side to the picture of the progress by the under-17 team to the semi-final of the ECB Cup for the first time ever. It has been the policy of the IWCB in the past couple of seasons to invite players from mainland associations to come to play for island representative sides at both under-15 and under-17 levels. The decision was made in an effort to strengthen the island teams and was initially restricted to 1 or 2 players. However, the situation has now changed dramatically to such an extent that in a recent game, in an earlier round of the Under-17 Cup, no fewer than 8 players from the mainland were in the island team. I find this situation alarming, and the question needs to be asked as to what has happened to those island boys of this cohort who had played for the island at under-11, under-13 and under-15 levels. It is widely recognised nationally. Within the game, there are problems enough in keeping players involved beyond the age of 15. Excluding them from island representative cricket will only further exacerbate this problem. Surely a balance needs to be struck. I look to the IWCB to firstly recognise this as a problem and secondly to act upon it.
And we have from S. Roberts of Newport. So the island's Labour Party is asking for the leadership to canvass the views of its membership to help formulate a coherent and representative policy. That seems eminently sensible to me. Labour's strategy, as far as it goes, seems to be to keep under the radar, hoping that, should the Tory party eat itself, no one will notice Labour has not bothered or had the courage to establish a credible position. But seeking power without facing up to such a vital issue is like walking into the shops without treading on the pavement cracks. You just end up looking stupid or shifty. So if the local party wants Corbyn and co to show some credibility, then fair play to them. It is a sensible suggestion, and in the current crazy post-Brexit world, sensible, inverted commas, is not a word that comes readily to mind.
Hospital thanks from Maxine Ward, Cowes. St Mary's Hospital has more than its fair share of criticism and I would like to offer a different view. Unfortunately, I had the need to call 111, who summoned an ambulance to my elderly mother late on a Friday evening. The paramedics were patient, calm and extremely professional. After examination, she was taken to A&E and despite the waiting room being packed, the registration process was carried out without any further distress to my mother and she was ushered to a side room. By the early hours of the morning, she was admitted to Colwell Ward and spent a week in isolation due to a serious infection. The care she experienced was exemplary. From the consultant to the tea lady, the kindness and respect shown was both genuine and heartwarming. This made a very distressing and uncomfortable episode almost pleasurable. The nursing staff and health workers were always happy to linger for a chat while carrying out their duties, which was invaluable as she was in a separate room, so could have felt cut off. The NHS should be proud of its outstanding staff, and St Mary's deserves more local plaudits. A very big thank you to all the staff.
And solve gridlock from Mrs Eileen Edgerton of Gurnard. With reference to last week's front page, I suggest before the Isle of Wight Council wastes any more of our money on traffic schemes we don't need, they resolve the problems in the centre of Newport. On Thursday, August the 16th at 4:30 p.m, I drove up Lower Pyle Street to enter Town Lane. On reaching Town Lane, it took 15 minutes to reach the traffic lights at the junction with South Street. Due to congestion in South Street, as soon as the traffic lights turned green, only one car at a time could leave before the lights changed to red. This created gridlock around the whole area. Get your priorities right, Isle of Wight Council.
Isle of Wight Civil War? From Peter Deacon Wright. The time has come, I believe, to demand the resignation of the Isle of Wight Council. I call for this on the worth of Oliver Cromwell, delivered to the Rump Parliament in 1653. It is high time to put an end to your sitting in County Hall, which you have dishonoured by your contempt for the people you are supposed to serve and defiled by your wilful incompetence. You are a factious crew and enemies of all good government. You are a pack of mercenary wretches that, like Isan, would sell your county for a mess of pottage. Is there a single virtue remaining amongst you? I think not. Is there one among you that has the least care for the Isle of Wight? I doubt it. You are grown intolerably odious to the people of this island. You were deputed here by the people to get grievances redressed, yet you have become the greatest grievance. The people now call upon you to put an end to your proceedings, most iniquitous. On this place you should depart immediately. Out of this place. Go, get out, make haste. In the name of God, go.
And here we have a letter from Hugh Griffiths of Sandown. Along with a significant number of island voters at the last election, I put my cross next to the name of Bob Seeley, who emerged the winner by a significant margin. Many people voted differently, and I appreciate they may not share my view that Mr Seeley has represented the island well at Westminster. Judging from his comments in last week's Weekender, Malcolm Mime does not share my positive assessment of our Member of Parliament. What I do find difficult is the fact that the outspoken Mr Mime does not want his photo to accompany his column. Other members of your panel of columnists identify themselves with the photo, as did Keith Newbury and Charlotte Houghton in earlier times. They frequently had controversial views, but never shied away from showing their faces to accompany their columns. Please remind Malcolm our country is not a totalitarian state, and he has nothing to fear in expressing a view not held by the government or its supporters. My own views differ from his, but I am happy to comply with the rules of the county press and supply my name and address. I am even prepared to supply my photo, and there is an editor's footnote to this. There are circumstances in which the county press withholds a correspondent's name and address, but knows who has written the letter. This is always done for good reasons. The same applies to Malcolm Mime.
Tip of the iceberg, from Peter Shreve, Carisbrooke. To those in education, it is no surprise the latest figures for school exclusions are up. Indeed, if we include the high proportion of children educated at home, this may even be the tip of the iceberg. We agree with last month's Education Committee Forgotten Children report that the government needs to discourage the off-rolling of pupils, i.e. the removal of pupils from school rolls. I raise the simple questions. Why are the numbers rising and who is responsible? This is a perverse consequence of the current accountability system that makes some schools feel penalised for teaching pupils with additional needs. The present fragmentation of providers intent on improving their position in the league tables fails to encourage collaboration and cooperation. To best counter this, the government should give schools more credit for working with children with complex needs. The government should promote additional incentives, including quicker access to specialist support. Recent delays in autism diagnoses are to be deplored. Additional funding and an increased role for the local authority, which lacks real power and money to intervene and thereby support non-authority schools and the island as a whole. Less testing and the assurance the curriculum will remain creative and flexible to allow all pupils to thrive. We look forward to the findings of the Timpson review of exclusions towards the end of this year and trust it will further raise issues of funding and the detrimental effects of the current accountability measures, which do nothing to discourage schools to exclude.
Green agenda for Isle of Wight from Tanja Rebel, Cows. This summer the Isle of Wight saw an interesting environmental conference where the council expressed its green ambitions and where it launched a bid for the island to become a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Shortly after this, we learnt the PFI contract with Island Road was being renegotiated at considerable cost. In the light of stated ambitions, it would be good to include the following in the contract. Clear specification for the colour temperature of street lighting, maximum 2,700 K instead of the current 55,700 K, so the island finally gets lighting which is benign for public health, ecology and sky glow. A ban on the use of glyphosate and other harmful chemicals in parks, verges, hedges as well as other public spaces. The recent court case in the US regarding the carcinogenic effects of glyphosate should make this an absolute priority. Proper tree protection so that iconic trees such as the umbrella tree in East Cowes are not chopped down. Better still to keep this dangerous technology off the island as it will be harmful to humans, wildlife and plants. Scientists from across the world have appealed for a moratorium on its rollout until more rigorous research has been conducted, and it would be wise to listen to their arguments. Further to the above, if the island is to live up to its green potential, it is time to start investing in a comprehensive, fully connected and fully commutable island-wide cycle network, as well as a train, tram, podcar network, which would decongest our roads and help us step into the 21st century. Add to this more local production of food and the growing of hemp to make high-grade paper, biodegradable plastic and clothes as well as sustainable building materials, and the island will be well on its way to become a true eco-island.
Global warming from Steve Goodman, Newport. I'm lucky enough to be able to spend some time and money at the beach while our farmers are busy doing what they can for us despite the now normal, more extreme, more frequent weather complications. And a lot of less fortunate people and other unlucky species all over the world are having to cope with the consequences of our poor individual and collective choices. Now that even The Sun and Daily Mail have had to mention mankind's continuing contribution to catastrophic climate change, could we please now have some serious help from our political servants locally, nationally and internationally, just in case there may still be time to halt and possibly reverse some of the damage before life becomes too difficult for almost all of us.
A ferry investment indeed. From Paul Dobson of Newport. The letter from R.C. Thomas is laughable and goes to show how little this person knows about Wightlink and business operations in general. Such reinvestment is better known as tax deductible or tax avoidance, perfectly legal, for otherwise this reinvested money would be paid to HMRC in taxes. By reinvesting, this is largely avoided and it increases the value of the company. The Wightlink £17 million plus profits at the latest calculation are obscene and can only be attributed to ripping off customers, Isle of Wight residents in particular. I can provide evidence to show Wight-linked vehicle travel charges have risen by over 30% year on year for the past 4 years at least. And if this is not a rip-off, then what is? Imagine such invisible increases being applied to other modes of transport, such as trains, planes and buses, not to mention fuel costs.
Stifling opinion from W.H. Bromwich from Cowes. Since the county press was taken over by NewsQuest, perhaps it is no longer so much in the pocket of the Isle of Wight Council, prompting a new paper, owned by Carol Dennett and Mark Potter, to launch their new publication, cleverly called the Isle of Wight Observer. Remember how the Tories hijacked the title, The Real Living Wage, with their much cheaper version, The Living Wage? The Isle of Wight Observer, unlike the Isle of Wight County Press, does not allow public comment on their stories on their online platform. So much for democracy and open public discourse. It thereby tightly controls its newsfeed to islanders and stifles opinion on its stories. Running roughshod over lively debate that holds those in power on the island to account is testament that the old island order, with their new poster boy, must be running scared.
And now we have looking back, 100 years ago, August the 24th, 1918, Shanklin mourned the death of one of the town's oldest residents, Richard Young, who was headmaster at the parochial schools for 35 years, died aged 82. He was active in public and business affairs and was a county councillor for the Shanklin district for 11 years. And Princess Beatrice attended a garden meeting held in the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Templeman Mew in Newport. The garden party was in aid of the Newport and District War Hospital supply depot and the women's emergency canteens for soldiers.
75 years ago, August the 21st, 1943. The village of Shorrell banded together against what they branded human pests. People been stealing from allotments around the village, despite the wartime effort to produce as much food as possible. One resident said the act was particularly contemptible and that the pests were saboteurs. More spontaneous cheers were raised on the island than ever before when people watched anti-aircraft guns take down several enemy planes. The planes were flying at great height, appearing as small dots in the sky to the naked eye, but the AA gunners soon got in range and burst close to the group of planes. Thousands of people were watching the planes over the east end of the island.
And 50 years ago, August the 17th, 1968, the Queen visited the British hovercraft factory at East Cowes. During her stay for Cowes Week, she was accompanied by Prince Andrew and Viscount Linley and was shown around by Chairman of the British Hovercraft Corporation. Her Majesty's visit arrived on the tails of a large debate in Parliament on the laws surrounding the crafts. Cowes Week died a premature death when the breeze, which had been in short supply all week, disappeared altogether for the final weekend. One yachting journalist wrote, "The sun was on strike throughout the week, and on Saturday the wind came out in sympathy. Nearly half of the 300 yachts competing in the regatta gave up in the airless conditions."
25 years ago, August the 20th, 1993. Marks & Spencer finally received the go-ahead from Medina planners for its proposed £15 million store in Newport. The approval was given at a specially convened meeting, which many residents from Medina Avenue crowded into County Hall. More than 550 people signed a petition urging approval for the store. A new star name joined the county press editorial team. Actor, writer and former Python Michael Palin, who universal fame for his hugely successful TV series Around the World in 80 Days and Pole to Pole, joined the county press as a columnist. He said, "I've always wanted to know more about the Isle of Wight, and this way I'll certainly be thrown in at the deep end."
10 years ago, August the 22nd, 2008. The island was set to be at the hub of a cutting-edge wind turbine technology, bringing an investment of tens of millions and more than 100 skilled jobs. Vestas, a turbine blade manufacturing company, announced a new state-of-art research and development centre at the Isle of Wight base site. Researchers working on a documentary about Carisbrooke Castle were astounded when they uncovered a treasure trove of memorabilia relating to the Isle of Wight military tattoos of the late 1960s, including the ensign which flew over the castle as the Governor of the Isle of Wight, Lord Louis Mountbatten, took the salute.
We now move on to Wight Memories, bringing Ireland back to new life. Bob Welfy, Britain-Norman Aircraft Preservation Society chairman, writes about the Islander aircraft built in Bembridge more than 50 years ago, which is now under restoration on the island and will be completed this year. The historic Aurigny Air Services BN Islander aircraft, registration GAVCN, is the third BN2 Islander produced at Bembridge Airport and the oldest Britain-Norman Islander aircraft still in existence. This year, the Britain-Norman Aircraft Preservation Society, in short BNAPS, will see its project to restore the aircraft come to fruition when the aircraft is fully assembled at BNAP's Restoration Workshop near Ryde. More than 50 years ago, GAVCN, or Charlie November, was under construction in the original Bembridge hangar alongside what is now the Propeller Inn at Bembridge Airport. First flown from Bembridge Airport on April the 24th, 1967, GAVCN appeared at the Paris show in June and on August the 18th, 1967, was awarded its Passenger Transport Certificate of Airworthiness. Originally delivered to Glossair in August 1967, it operated the first passenger-carrying flight for the newly formed airline Aurigny Air Services, when it carried 4 passengers from Alderney to Guernsey on March the 1st, 1968.
After about 7 years of service with Aurigny, Charlie November was traded in and subsequently exported to Guadeloupe in 1977. After serving with a number of operators in the Caribbean region, by 1999 it was left in a semi-derelict state at Isle Grande Airport in Puerto Rico. Thanks to the efforts of Britain-Norman historians and sponsorship by Airstream International, the Islander was brought back to the United Kingdom in early 2000, originally to be restored to fix, and BNAPS was formed to provide funds and oversee the work. However, this did not work out as planned, and by 2009 the dismantled remains had been left in open storage. BNAPS was revitalised in 2010 and the remains moved into safekeeping while the future prospects for the Islander were considered. A survey of the conditions of the remains showed they were recoverable, and later on, after informal discussions with the Civil Aviation Authority, it was decided that a high-quality static rebuild was the only feasible option. The restoration work was started in 2011 using workshop facilities adjacent to Bembridge Harbour, where good progress was made. Some 18 months ago, the future prospect for the wing had looked somewhat bleak, and there was a feeling that the task of rebuilding the wing was just too much of a challenge. Also, due to the limited size of the workshop facilities at Harbour Farm, work on the wing was lagging behind. After much hard work and perseverance, the wing of Islander GAVCN has now reached the stage where its structure has been rebuilt and is now ready for top-coat painting. The restoration work included extensive reskinning, fabrication of missing parts, fitting of new parts and reconstruction of damaged parts, together with extensive de-corroding and removal of the old paint.
A section of the port wing that had to be cut off to allow transport to the UK in a 40-foot freight container was reattached. Following the move to a larger workshop in March 2016 and concentrated effort from the restoration team, the situation was turned around such that the wing is now ready to be set up for top coat spray painting. This will lead the way into the final assembly phase in the coming months. The project has received continuing support from the industry with individual donations, grants from the Isle of Wight High Sheriff's Trust, the Transport Trust and Wight Aid. The restoration of Islander GAVCN has only been possible through the continuing dedicated efforts of our restoration team of volunteers. BNAPS is planning an official unveiling of the restored aircraft later this year, when it will be seen in the colours of Aurigny Air Services, as it was 50 years ago. If anyone's interested in the Britain-Norman Aircraft Preservation Society and would like to know more about the Society and the restoration project, get in touch by emailing bob@bnaps.org.uk or by telephoning 01329 315561.
And now we have my view. Garlic Festival just like 1976 all over again is the headline. The 1970s. What a time to be alive. If you were a grown-up back then, you might have quite the decade that style forgot, with the 3-day week, women's lib and the common market. Even now, some West Wighters probably still rue the day when the country converted to the decimal currency system and pound, shillings and pence gave way to new pennies. But for me, the 70s was a magical time. As well as those shiny new pocket money coins, the TV was full of shiny pop stars, which quite literally glittered on our screens. Even if we watched in black and white, our imaginations were in Technicolor. Tomorrow's World gave us weekly peek into the future for home computer terminals, electronic cash and pocket calculators. Just a few years after that small step for a man, we were all poised for mankind's giant leap. To a soundtrack of Show Waddy Waddy and the Wurzels, I remember excitedly working on a school project, speculating about life in the year 2000. That date seemed impossibly far away. I would have to live 2 more of my current lifetimes to get there. A dizzy concept for my young brain to compute. What might it be like? As I looked around the family home, a small Victorian villa, I imagined a place equipped with space-age appliances, but no car, as we'd all travel by hoverbus. We could eat powdered protein like astronauts. I would have silver hair. Concerts would be performed by tiny holographic pop stars playing in the palms of our hands. Replicas of the real thing performing just for you. As I used my best felt tip pens to illustrate my project, I wonder what job I would have. The millennium came and went. Nearly 2 more decades have passed. Over 40 years since I worked on that project. My 1970s version of this post-millennial fantasy future came flooding back to me last weekend, prompted by the discovery that Show Her Daddy was still going strong, live on stage at the Shanklin Theatre. The next day I found myself back in Shankers at a private shindig where I broke from the buffet for a moment to whip out my smartphone and film the party's entertainment, a Beatles tribute act. Playing it back, I watched the facsimile Fab Four, tiny light rendered figures in my outstretched hand. Just call me Nostradamus. I still live in a Victorian villa, no automated home for me. My hair is silver, but that is more to do with the ravages of time than any ultra-modern style statement. There's a hoverbus, but it's not quite as futuristic as its name suggests. My felt-tip pens may be virtual, but I continue to spend my days colouring in, although now I do it for money. Uncannily, at last Sunday's Garlic Festival, I stood in a blustery field with hundreds of other people singing along to the Wurtles, and it was 1976 all over again.
So this is from Jim Gibbons, Seismic Changes in Politics over EU. We're used to Conservatives and Labour being the two big political parties, but it was not always so. In Iolanthe, his brilliant satire on the politics of his day, W.S. Gilbert wrote, "Nature does not always contrive that every boy and every gal that's born into the world alive is either a little liberal or else a little conservative." Before his day, there was a long period when the big parties were the Whigs and the Tories. So things do change, though slowly in terms of human life. What will be the next big change in politics? In the 1997 general election, there was a lower than usual turnout, but the highest majority for a while. Tony Blair's Labour got a majority of 179, which was justifiably called a landslide. In his next election, his majority went down, and that was called another landslide. It was a remarkable performance. In the referendum of 2017, the count was not done in terms of constituencies, but in different voting districts. Why, may you reasonably ask? The only reason that occurs to me is to ensure the results could not be compared to a general election. Anyway, the forecast was 52% to stay in and 48% to leave. The result was the opposite, and the expressions on the faces of the TV commentators and political spokesmen were a joy to behold. I'm only surprised they didn't wear black ties and armbands. An academic called Chris Hanretty toiled through the figures for England and Wales and found that in terms of constituencies, the Leavers had a majority of 421, the sort of majority that politicians can only dream of, and Tony Blair would have given his right arm for, or at least Gordon Brown's. The intelligentsia, self-selected, proclaimed the peasants had been led astray by demagogues and populist groups, and that the situation could be remedied by leaving the EU while staying in its constituent parts.
In my later letter in the County Press, I forecast this would happen, and I have had no reason to change my mind. The unpopulist parties, if I may call them such, rejected completely the thought they ought to learn something from the voters. So what happens now? Our leaders are negotiating by threatening the EU that if we don't get a good deal, we will not even leave. So there. The EU is sniggering behind its hand at the British notion of bargaining, and will be laughing openly when the dust settles. However, there comes a reckoning eventually. At the next general election, I believe the voting public, which traditionally votes as Dad did, is in the mood to take its revenge on those MPs and putative MPs who treated them with contempt, and will vote accordingly, not for a party but for a policy. It is said that the person to be beheaded hears the whisper of the axe. Some of the Remainer MPs can hear it already. This month's quote, who proclaimed there must be no attempts to remain in the EU or to rejoin it through the back door. Last month it was an Iron Bevan who said of the doctors, "I have stuffed their mouths with gold." And Hartley Shawcross, "We are the masters now," though some versions say at the moment. I was in a taxi the other day and chatting to the driver on this, that and the floaty. He said, "You know what they should have done? Given the old one to the shipwright and said, 'Copy that.' Perhaps we should replace the House of Lords with a House of Taxi Drivers. The number of voting peers goes up each time there is a change of government, as the new PM finds it stuffed with the uncooperative other lot, and it is easier to make another lot than to grasp the nettle."
We move on to Behind the News. Ireland's nautical history sails into the future. For 20 years, the Classic Boat Museum has been an attraction in Newport and later East Cowes. The Boat Museum faced its biggest challenge in 2016 when it was given notice to quit its home. The challenge for museum trustees was to find a home for more than 50 classic sailing, motor and lifeboats where they could be displayed safely. Step forward the Harrison Trust, owner of the Medina village on the west side of the river, which offered temporary use of old shipbuilding sheds under the hammerhead crane. However, the sheds were not watertight and a lot of work was needed. The classic boats were moved to their new home in March 2016, 2 months after a devastating fire ripped through Medina Yard. Fortunately, the museum buildings were not damaged. It took a team of volunteers supporting companies and the Isle of Wight Council 2 years to enable the Isle of Wight to once again be able to enjoy a first-class visitor attraction. The museum now houses an important collection of historic craft. There is Shirley Robertson's Olympic gold winning Europe, plus carbon hulls and foils from the 2017 America's Cup led by Sir Ben Ainslie, and also from the Red Bull Youth America's Cup. The latest acquisition, a huge solid wing used on Ainslie's test boat, joins the hull, which arrived before the opening of the boat shed in July. The wing, combined with huge carbon fibre foils, helped Ben and his team perfect flying on foils, which enabled them to successfully compete in Bermuda in 2017. The hull and wing form part of a story which will take museum visitors back to an era where Saunders Roe built flying boats. The link between sailing and flying is closer than many realise. Both use the principles of aerodynamics and hydrodynamics to generate lift.
Ben's boat was a combination of the two principles while not completely leaving the water. Mark McNeil, museum chairman, said, "It has been a fabulous summer for the museum. We have opened our new boat shed and hosted our first party during Cowes Classic Week." And Mark added, "I would like to thank Ben's team for their generosity in allowing the museum to continue immortalising the history of the America Cup in its original home in Cowes, with a special thanks to the Shore team for all their help in delivering and assembling the wing with our volunteers. The boat shed in Cowes West is now open for visitors on Tuesdays and Fridays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The museum would like to expand its team of volunteers so the boat shed could extend its opening hours."
And now we move on to the What's On section. Ian Shaw, an accomplished organist of more than 40 years, who regularly plays recitals at St Mary Ab Church, London, will be hosting a 45-minute recital at All Saints Church in Calbourne on Monday at 1 o'clock. There's free entry with donations to the upkeep of the church.
And keep getting to the end. It could be any one of us. The title of the next Apollo Players show gives a flavour of its subject matter as well as its twist. Alan Ayckbourn's murder mystery has not only plenty of humour and traditional red herrings along the way, but it generally could be any one of us, because there are 3 possible endings, and director Mike Batchelor, taking on his first Apollo show, has decided to let the audience decide who done it. It could be any one of us, staged at the Apollo Theatre, Pyle Street, Newport, from August the 31st to September the 8th, not Sunday or Mondays, curtain up at 7:30 p.m.
Newport Scrabble Club meets in the Conservative Club Pyle Street every Tuesday at 6:45 for a 7 p.m. start. All abilities welcome, and your first 4 evenings are free of charge.
The Alzheimer Cafe takes place on Thursdays between 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. St John's Church Hall, Newport. This is a free, informal meeting for people living with dementia, their families, friends, careers, and those carers, and those with an interest in the disease.
A curry and quiz night takes place at Key Arts, Newport, on Wednesday between 7 and 9:30 p.m. Entry is £6 to include the quiz and a curry, and bookings can be made by contacting 822 490.
And the Rainbow White Singers meet on Wednesdays at All Saints Church Hall in Ryde from 1:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. The sessions are informal, there are no auditions. The weekly fee is £3, which includes refreshments. For more information, call musical director Ada Coleman on 868 546.
An evening of sweet music will take place at St Albans Church, A cornucopia of colours is on Tuesday, August the 28th from 7 p.m. Guests will be Braden Community Choir and Christopher Pickett of Arreton, who returns as solo pianist. Others taking part are George Westcott and Andrew Pellow, piano duettists. Admission is free with a retiring donation for the church, and refreshments will be available.
Adults over 16 with any disability are welcome to go along every Saturday night to the New Strollers Club. It is alcohol free. There is dancing, table tennis, darts, pool, karaoke, board games, movie nights and snack bar with cold drinks, tea and coffee. It is at Haylands Farm. Membership is free and subs are £2 per week. Just turn up or telephone 07890 67009 if you are interested in playing in the disability football team. It's also free to join.
Do you need help getting online, accessing the internet, setting up an email address or job searching? Cowes Library has a digital support assistant who offers free one-to-one sessions on Fridays between 10 and noon. Sessions must be booked in advance. The library also has a friendly and experienced family historian offering one-to-one sessions in helping with family history, whether you're just starting out or have a family history problem. Sessions are held in Cowes Library on Monday mornings at an hourly rate of £6 and must be booked in advance. If this time is not convenient, speak to a member of staff who will try to arrange an alternative time. Bookings for either of these can be made by contacting Cowes Library on 293341.
And now, hoping you have a very enjoyable weekend. It's cheerio for the time being from Barry.
And it's goodbye from Sue. Thank you.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, the Brewers ordered to compensate a worker who's losing his sight over his dismissal, and the unexpected compensations of a sultry summer night.
Hovering by the back door, the slight breeze feels pleasant against my bare skin, and the garden beckons like a pool of cool, refreshing water, inviting me to take the plunge.
Also tonight, the research which has caused an eye surgeon's jaw to drop.
So the accuracy of the algorithm was about 94%, and that was on a par or maybe even slightly better than a number of human retinal specialists at Moorfields Eye Hospital.
More about the role artificial intelligence may play in saving sight later in the programme. But first, one of the most successful pioneers of the craft beer revival has been ordered to pay compensation to a worker who's losing his sight. James Ross worked in the packaging department of Brewdog's headquarters near Aberdeen. He was dismissed because it was believed he could no longer do his job safely. But in a majority decision, an employment tribunal ruled that the brewery had failed to offer him the chance of reasonable adaptations to his job that might have allowed him to carry on working for them. The tribunal also expressed astonishment that a company with around 800 workers should appear ignorant of its responsibilities under the Equalities Act to try to keep disabled workers in their jobs if possible. James was awarded just over £12,000 to compensate him for lack of reasonable adjustments and injury to his feelings. Tom Walker has been telling me more about the case.
James Ross had a packaging job in Brewdog in the company's Aberdeenshire brewery when he reported deteriorating eyesight to his bosses in January of last year. The tribunal heard that the company decided he couldn't continue with that packaging role. They said they'd offered an alternative job at the site because they wanted to prioritise the safety of the team.
Tell us a bit about Brewdog. Who are they? What do they do?
It's a very trendy brewery with modern smart designs on the bottles. They very much rode the explosion in popularity of craft ale, and it has 46 bars around the world. Now, the tribunal heard that the RNIB in Scotland had actually visited the site. Can you tell us a bit about that and what they found? One RNIB employment advisor had been to the brewery and recommended a number of changes that would allow James to keep working. A second advisor wrote a report which said he felt that if they could have ended James's employment there and then, they would have done so. The tribunal expressed concerns about the lack of knowledge of Brewdog employees dealing with these matters.
So what do Brewdog have to say?
Well, they said it was a difficult matter, and they said it was also a difficult matter for the tribunal panel because it was split over the outcome. They said they worked with James to find an alternative suitable role where his safety wouldn't be compromised, and that they ended up in a position where they had to balance James's wishes with the best interests of the team around him. They regretted that an agreement couldn't be reached, but also said they had a moral responsibility to prioritise the safety of their team.
Tom Walker, thanks. Well, listening to that was Ian Brown of RNIB Scotland. As you heard Tom say, they did visit the company to offer advice both to James Ross and to Brewdog. Well, Ian told me what a person who begins to lose their sight while working ought to be able to expect.
Employers, Peter, actually do have obligations under the Equality Act of 2010 to make best efforts to try and retain an employee either in their job or make best efforts to find them alternative work. The problem often is employer misperceptions of what sight loss means. A few years ago, a survey by the Department for Work and Pensions of employers found that 92% believed it was either difficult or impossible to employ someone with an impaired vision. Now, when that survey asked them what their idea of a blind worker was, it was someone who could see absolutely nothing, virtually always had a guide dog. They had misperceptions about, I wouldn't get insurance because the person would be a fire risk, they couldn't see where the fire exits are. All this kind of stuff, which is, it's not remotely accurate.
And I believe in this case concerns were expressed at the tribunal about the level of knowledge about visual impairment in the company.
Yes, and I think it's still pretty widespread, actually. We know in Scotland alone, there's school teachers, senior civil servants, financial analysts, broadcast journalists, dare I say, and even astrophysicists who have got, in some cases, really quite serious sight loss. But their employer has gone that extra few inches to adapt the workplace. And sometimes it can be fairly simple things. One IT lecturer who was partly sighted, all the university he worked at and Dundee had to do was change the office environment, the lighting and some of the colour scheme. Something as simple as that helped him retain his job.
Now, James has received some compensation in this case. What advice, though, would you give to perhaps somebody who is losing their sight and is in a company at the moment?
I think the first thing I'd do is ask for something in writing. You or your trade union representative, if you have one, remind the employer that they do have obligations under the Equality Act of 2010, not just in recruitment of people with disabilities, but the retention of people with disabilities who acquire disabilities such as sight loss. The employer must give good reasons why they're saying your job might be under threat.
And I suppose one of the problems is that perhaps there is almost a knee-jerk reaction, maybe sometimes on the part of people who themselves are losing their sight, that it's going to mean that you can't do their job, which might be a hasty thing to think.
I'm sure it is. And again, we can help. We have sight loss advisory services. I can talk with people in confidence, tell them, reassure them that sight loss doesn't necessarily mean the end of your life as you know it. That, with today's age and equipment, with training, in many cases you can still do the job you're doing. We know many cases, in some cases, make quite high-powered professional jobs.
Ian Brown of RNIB Scotland. Now, Radio 4 weather guru Louise Lear told us this morning that the latest bout of sultry weather covering much of the UK could be gone by the weekend. Good news for many, but rather to his surprise, not for In Touch columnist Mike Lambert.
Tired of fidgeting, I abandon all hope of sleep, slip on shorts and t-shirt, and trying not to wake my wife, tiptoe towards the bedroom door. All I can think about is getting outside to catch any faint breath of wind. Hovering by the back door, the slight breeze feels pleasant against my bare skin, and the garden beckons like a pool of cool, refreshing water, inviting me to take the plunge. Striding across the patio, I feel too late the pressure of something under my foot and hear the splintering crack of a snail. In the quiet, sunless garden, molluscs are on the move, traversing the dry Saharan wastes of my patio in search of fresh oases and new pot plants to plunder. Only for this one, the game is up. Fishing for my hearing aids, I pop them in and turn them up to maximum. 5 years ago, when I was prescribed hearing aids, I didn't think much of the idea. Blind and going deaf? Great. But now, I think they're wonderful. Sometimes, sitting next to a noisy crest-beater on a train, I can turn them down to 0. Or as now, use them to magnify every little secret sound in my midnight garden. I've no idea what time it is, but judging by the empty skies and the absence of trains thundering between London and Cambridge, it's dead of night. And such silence throws any slight disturbance into sharp relief. In the cool, quiet air, the garden feels at its most serene and resplendent. From the flower bed, a jasmine's pumping out its exotic perfume. I sit on a low wall, still damp from that evening's sprinkler, and pass my hands through the overhanging foliage. Now they're wet, the leaves more readily reveal their structural beauty to my inquisitive fingers. Running my hand down a fern frond, I recognise its exquisite geometry. A giant feather, made of countless sub-feathers, all gently tilted like the slats on a Venetian blind. My reverie is rudely interrupted by a sudden eruption of sound. Way down at the bottom of the garden, there's a clattering of fence panels and a splintering of wood, followed by a soft thud. A fox has just entered the garden. I feel annoyed, intruded upon, and maybe a little bit scared. Does it see me sitting here? Will it work out I'm blind? Feeling vulnerable, I get to my feet, glare in the direction of the noise, and give my best attempt at a low, territorial growl. Fortunately, it seems to work, as the fox continues its noisy progress over the opposite fence and forages off down the hill. From the pond comes a familiar slurp of one of my koi, hoovering down some floating scrap of food. I imagine the giant fish suspended in the cool water, with just enough starlight to reveal the silhouette of a struggling insect. While the city sleeps, my garden is a hive of activity. A gust of wind passes over the surface of the pond, and for the first time I feel a tiny bit chilly, like it might be nice to go back indoors. Maybe I'll give my hands a good scrub, make myself another final cup of tea, and join the rest of my species in sleep.
Mike Lambert, and we'd love to hear your unexpected compensations for lack of sight. Now, AI, or artificial intelligence, seems to be dominating the news at the moment. Only yesterday we heard it could be more disruptive than the Industrial Revolution as a potential threat to jobs. But there's good news too, contained in the results of a study which says AI may be about to revolutionise the speed and efficiency with which eye disease can be diagnosed. The study was a collaboration between Moorfields Eye Hospital in London and DeepMind, which is part of Google. Well, I've been talking to the man who described the findings as jaw-dropping. Dr Piers Keane is an ophthalmic consultant at Moorfields.
What we've been doing is applying a technique called deep learning to these high-resolution scans called OCT scans, which stands for Optical Coherence Tomography. And we've taught the algorithm how to diagnose and identify the commonest retinal diseases that can cause blindness.
And what did it show?
What we've really been astounded at the results is that the algorithm became as good as world-leading specialists, retinal specialists at Moorfields Eye Hospital at diagnosing the common causes of retinal blindness.
And can you give us an indication of the extent to which it achieved accuracy?
What it was able to do was look at these OCT scans and assess more than 50 different retinal diseases and give a referral decision and make a diagnosis on those scans. So the accuracy of the algorithm was about 94% for identifying the most urgent diagnoses. And that was on a par or maybe even slightly better than a number of human retinal specialists at Moorfields Eye Hospital.
You described this result as jaw-dropping. Can you explain why?
On the one hand, I expected good results because, DeepMind are arguably the world's leading artificial intelligence company. And I always knew that this was a problem that was very amenable to the application of AI. On the other hand, though, it really was quite literally jaw-dropping when we saw just how good the results were, because the algorithm performs, on a par with retina specialists at Moorfields, some of whom have more than 20 years of experience looking at these scans.
Does it not slightly worry you that actually the machine can do what you've been doing as a professional for years?
No, emphatically no. I think that this is only one small aspect of my job as an ophthalmic surgeon. I don't think that we'll ever encounter a situation where a patient receives an injection in their eye or receives surgery on their eye without a human being in the loop to actually make the final diagnosis and to bring together the entire clinical picture for that patient.
Just explain, you've said already that this can do this with a number of eye conditions. Can you give me examples?
At the moment, it's restricted to sight-threatening diseases affecting the retina, so the nerve tissue at the back of the eye. So the most common examples of that would be conditions like age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, diabetic macular edema, but then a whole range of other, less common diseases, things like blocked blood vessels affecting the retina, swelling of the retina due to uveitis and inflammatory disease, and, as I say, a range of other conditions.
What effects are you saying this will have? Because as you've described, these macular diseases do cause the major amount of blindness in this country.
This will be able to be used in hospital eye services on the NHS to try to flag those patients with the most severe, urgently sight-threatening diseases to allow them to be seen and treated at the earliest possible point, because all of the evidence we have suggests that earlier detection leads to earlier treatment, leads to better outcomes for these patients.
And what's happening at the moment as far as seeing people in time is concerned?
The reality is that unfortunately, people are waiting for their appointments in the clinic, and often they're irreversibly losing sight while they wait for their appointments. For just one condition of age-related macular degeneration, we audited the number of referrals that we receive. And so in 2016, Moorfields Eye Hospital received about 7,000 referrals as possible age-related macular degeneration, but only 800 of those cases actually had the disease. And so that puts enormous pressure on our services to try and get those patients seen quickly. Now, for that particular condition, the Royal College of Ophthalmologists states that those patients should be seen and treated within 2 weeks. Now, the reality is that, and this is not just for Moorfields or the NHS, but all around the world, that often patients are not seen and treated within that 2-week time, and they irreversibly lose some of their sight because of those delays.
There have been worries expressed that this will risk giving your personal health data to a large tech company, in this case Google. What safeguards will there be that, such information won't be shared?
Once this algorithm has been developed, it doesn't really require further information to be effective. It's not a question that your own personal data has to be then given to a company outside the NHS for it to give the correct answers.
When do you think we might see diagnoses routinely made by AI? Specifically in the eye.
I should say that I am someone who is an optimist for life in general, I would say. And so I think that this is coming soon. I would say that my best bet would be within 5 years, we will see this in routine clinical practice. So this is something that is going to happen soon. This is not something that's on the distant horizon, 10 years or more from now.
Dr. Piers Keane. And by the way, if you're wondering just how fast DeepMind can work, it can analyse 7,000 retinal scans in minutes. And finally, as regular In Touch listeners will know, It's been a rough couple of years for the RNIB. 4 out of 5 years in deficit, culminating this spring in the resignation of their chief executive over the safeguarding of pupils at one of the schools it was responsible for in Coventry. Well, the RNIB has been preparing a strategy for dealing with its problems, and it's now agreed to talk to In Touch about it. We'd like you to add your questions to ours about how the RNIB should be run in future. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme. You can email In Touch at bbc.co.uk or click on Contact Us on our website. And you can also get a podcast of tonight's programme from there and earlier editions as well. That's it from me, Peter Wight, producer Kevin Corr and the rest of the team. Goodbye.